Okay, good morning everybody, and Hazak Baruch. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Thursday morning, getting closer to Shabbat Kodesh. My friends, our Parashat Yitro, of course, is known for the 10 Commandments. And you would think that after all is said and done, after the 10 Commandments, we're on such a high, that the Parashat would end off on a similar note. Something that is extraordinary, something that's inspiring. And yet, right after the 10 Commandments, the Pasuk tells us something very interesting. The Pasuk goes over here into a very technical halacha, where God says, Vayomer Adonai Moshe, Kotomar el Bnei Israel. God says to Moshe on the mountain, after they receive the 10 Commandments, what are the first things that God tells Moshe? Atem reitem ki min hashamayim debarti imachem. You saw how I spoke to you from the heavens. Lo ta'asun iti Elohei kesef Elohei zahav. Do not make any image of gold or silver. Okay, and sorry, the computer's loading. Here we go. Do not make any god of silver, of gold, nor shall you make for yourselves a god of gold. And then, you know how the parasha ends off? Anyone? Take a guess. The most interesting halacha that's maybe so irrelevant. Halacha that has to do with the Mizbeach. First of all, so that's already limiting its reach in time, because the Beit HaMikdash wasn't always. And the Pasuk says, Mizbah adama ta'aseli, make for me an altar of earth, V'zabachta alav et olotecha, and you shall bring on it sacrifices, shelamecha, different types of sacrifices, tzonecha, your sheep, bekarecha, your ox, bechol hamakom asher askir et shemi avo elecha berechticha, in every place where I cause my name to be mentioned, I will come to you and bless you. Halacha, all of a sudden Torah goes on, after the high, after the inspiration, and it gives us a very, very interesting halacha about the Mizbeach, and you should bring a korban. And then, look at this, if that wasn't enough. Ve'im mizbah havanim ta'aseli, and if you make for me an altar of stones, lo tivnei eten gazit, do not build it of hewn stones. That means the stones cannot be cut. Ki harbecha henafta aleha vatehalleleha, because you will end up wielding your herev, your sword, on it, and you will profane it. Velo ta'ale b'ma'alot al mizbehi, and do not take steps up to the mizbeach. Asher lo tigale ervatecha alav, so that your nakedness may not be exposed upon it. So here we have, my friends, a very, very strange ending to most incredible parasha. Parasha is about the 10 Commandments. And all of a sudden, you go into these technical, detailed laws about the Mizbeach, and that first of all, if it's a Mizbeach of stone, you shouldn't cut the stones with a sword. And number two, there shouldn't be stairs, rather, there should be a ramp. So no sword and no stairs. Okay, is that a good title for today's class? Maybe. No sword and no stairs. My friends, first of all, let's understand this pasuk, and then we could go deeper, okay? Let's understand the pasuk word for word. Ve'im mizbah avanim ta'aseli. What does that mean? Someone please translate those words. Ve'im mizbah avanim ta'aseli. You will think that it means if you make for me an altar of stones. Rashi says, comes along Rashi and says, in the name of Rabbi Ishmael, Kol im ve'im shebatorah reshut. Every time the Torah writes the word im, it's telling you if. It's an option. Okay, in general, this was Rabbi Ishmael's philosophy, which is a much bigger study, but he holds it's optional. Okay, reshut. Chutz mishlosha. However, 3 ims are not optional, they are mandatory. When it says im, it doesn't mean if, but it means when. And one of them is our pasuk. Ve'im mizbah avanim ta'aseli doesn't mean if you will make for me a mizbeach of stones, but it means when you will make for me a mizbeach of stones. It means ka'asher, when you will do it, then don't make them from hewn stones. The stones should be complete. Because after all, you can't say it means if. Sheharei chova alecha levnot mizbah avanim. Because you have to build it. You don't have a choice in the matter. Okay. Another example. Anyone know where else the Torah writes im, but it really means when? It's actually next week, I think. Im kesef talve et ami. It says, if you will lend to someone money, right? Then there's laws of interest, right? So over there, Rashi says right here, it doesn't mean if you will lend him money. It means when. You have to lend him. You don't have a choice. It's not if you lend, when you lend. And finally, when it comes to the bikurim, the first fruits, im takriv minhat bikurim, again, minhat ha'omer, which is not optional but mandatory. Okay, so we got the first word clear. Im mizbah avanim doesn't mean if, but means when. When you will build an altar. Okay, so everybody, let's recap. Okay, what did we learn today so far? We learned that there's a beautiful parasha Yitro, and it ends with a very strange commandment, a commandment of the laws of the altar. We know in the Beit HaMikdash we had a big Mizbeach, a big altar where we brought sacrifices on, and we saw two halachot. First of all, that when you have this big Mizbeach made out of stone, that you shouldn't cut those stones with a sword. Okay? Because you're profaning it. We have to see what that means. Number two, you shouldn't take stairs, you should make a ramp. Okay? Now, let's see what Rabbeinu Bahia wants to say over here. What's the problem? What's the problem with cutting stones for the Mizbeach? Can anyone tell me? Okay. You know, in Judaism, we try to find why. Sometimes there's no why, sometimes we're stuck, sometimes we don't know, but whenever we can, we try to find the why. Why? The commentaries want to know why. Why can't I cut stones to make it? If I have to make a Mizbeach, a square, and it has to be straight and well cornered, then maybe I have an odd sized stone that needs to cut a little bit so that I can fit it. When you're building a house, maybe you've put tiles on the floor. Sometimes the tile, the tile size doesn't fit exactly onto the floor plan. Some tiles, let's say they're a foot wide, 2 feet wide, and then you're left with a few inches. What do? You have to cut the tile so you could fit it in this small space that's left in the corner. So some tiles need to be cut. The Torah says, don't cut the tiles of the Mizbeach. Find a smaller stone. Don't cut him. Why? What's the problem? Says over here, Rabbeinu Bahia. He brings over here no less than 3 opinions. Let's go one by one. Ta'am isur begazit b'mizbeach. The reason for this prohibition of hewn stones. Shelo yiyeh kavod hamizbeach shetiyeh miksat ha'even benuya b'mizbeach Hashem umiksata mushlechet ba'ashpot. It's not respectful to have part of a stone used on the altar and the other part discarded. That's what we call a desecration. It wouldn't be appropriate. It wouldn't be an honor to God. Right? Think about it. What do you do with the leftover tile that you cut for the floor of your house? You throw it away. But it wouldn't be kadosh, it wouldn't be nice if you did that with a mizbeach. Part of it you put on the mizbeach and the other part you threw on the floor. It's disgracing. That's the reason we don't want you to cut any stones. We want it to be a whole stone, because if you cut a stone, you may end up taking that cut piece, and what are you going to do with it? You're going to throw it away. It's not respectful. Very nice. That's Ken Perash HaChacham Rabbi Abraham. This is the opinion of the Ibn Ezra. Ibn Ezra says what we just said, that again the problem is that if you cut the stone, the problem is you're going to have a leftover that you're going to throw away, you're going to dispose. It's not nice. Okay. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Erev Pesach that falls out on Shabbat. So what do? You have to eat bread for Shabbat in the morning, but then you have to make sure you throw it away by 11 a.m. or whatever time it is. But how are you going to throw away the chametz? You can't burn it on Shabbat. So you make sure to only leave exactly the amount of bread that you're going to need so that you have almost very little left to throw away, right? This is just going back into my memory of what it similarly reminds me of. We don't want any leftovers. You have to eat exactly. Okay. The Rambam, he quotes over here now the Rambam Maimonides from the Moreh Nevuchim, where he explains different reasons for mizvot that are difficult to understand. The Rambam, he says, Katav Ta'am Bazeh, he explains, very similar. Bichlal Ta'ameh mizvot sheyar haka shelo yavo la'asot bahen tzura. Interesting. This is in general, by the way, the Rambam's approach. The Rambam, let's read what he says. Shelo ya'aseh bahen tzura v'tiyeh even maskit. We don't want that the person should have, if you cut a stone, you're going to have a leftover, but the problem is not that you're going to have a leftover that you're going to throw out. No, that's what the Ibn Ezra said. The Rambam says, I'm worried that you're going to have a leftover, that you're going to end up making from the leftover a carved image. Okay, so he's worried over here about idolatry. If you have leftover stone, you're going to make from that stone idols. Okay, again, this is in general the approach that the Rambam takes to many commandments. Why you can't do it, he connects to idolatry. Now, I just want to say, by the way, that in general, when studying the reason behind mitzvot, we have to know one very, 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 very important rule, and that is that the reason is not the only reason, it's a possible reason. At the end of the day, we don't really know the reason, and I'm telling you why I'm telling this. I'm saying this because a person, after studying the reason of a mitzvah, may conclude that if the reason is no longer applicable, then I no longer have to keep the commandment. Shlomo HaMelech made this mistake. Shlomo HaMelech, the Torah writes the reason for 2 commandments. The Torah usually doesn't give a reason. You know that? The Torah usually just says what? The reason? Don't worry about the reason. I tell you what. As if like a father. Sometimes a father says to his son, do X, Y, and Z. The kid says why. Dad says don't worry about why. Just do it. I'm in charge of the why. You're in charge of the doing. Okay? You do it. I'll worry about why. So God doesn't usually tell us why. Actually, 613 mitzvot, almost none of them he says why. He doesn't usually say the why. Just says the what. Some of them, though, he did tell us why. Some of them has a why. As an example, the Torah says a king cannot have many wives because they will stray his heart. So over here the Torah says why. Because. It says the because. Shlomo HaMelech was a very smart man. But sometimes you're too smart for your own good. Shlomo HaMelech, his wisdom led him to the end a little bit astray. He was so smart that Shlomo HaMelech felt that if I know the reason, so I could violate the commandment and not violate the reason. Yes? If the whole point that I cannot cross a red light is because it's dangerous, so at 3 a.m. when there's no cars, I could go through a red light. Right? That's what most people would think. Yeah? Why are there laws? To protect the people. If in this case the protection is irrelevant, then I could break the law. Okay? But that's not true with the commandments of the Torah. God's commandments, and the truth is, it's not true in any society. If you told a cop who caught you crossing the red light at 3 a.m. that, no, it's okay over here because there was no one, the cop would give you a bigger ticket maybe, right? So in life, we have to realize that the laws are laws disconnected from the reason. Whether or not I understand the reason, or I think the reason is applicable, I still have to keep the law. Shlomo HaMelech, he ended up violating this law because he thought that the reason didn't apply to him. The reason I can't have many wives, says Shlomo HaMelech, is because they're going to stray my heart. I don't have to worry. I'll make sure to convert them. And he ended up marrying many wives, and they ended up actually straying his heart. He ended up realizing that he failed, that he fell. The Torah ultimately was right. So I'm saying this because the Rambam, with this book, he raised many problems. This book that he wrote, the Moreh Nevuchim, the Guide to the Perplexed, was actually in his day burned. They actually burned all of his books because they were so angry at the Rambam for coming out with such a book, giving reasons. And the Rambam, again, for a short period, was put in excommunication. Certain rabbis, they shunned him. Of course, later on, there was another event that happened where they burned unfortunately many Sfarim in France, and they realized that this was actually a punishment for what they did to the Rambam, and they undid the ban on his books, which is why today the Rambam, we realize that he was the great eagle. He was someone who was very, very, very ahead of his time and had vision of all of Judaism. Like an eagle has big vision, large and wide. So this is what the Rambam writes. He writes many things have to do with idolatry. And unfortunately, some people conclude that, well, if that's the case, then today we don't have to do it because there's no problem of idolatry. I'll give you an example. The Rambam says, what's the reason I can't shave with a blade? Because he says back then it was the practice of idol worshippers to use a blade. It was the priests who used the blades for their preparation for idolatry. So a person may say, well, if that's the case today, priests don't use blades. And not only that, it's very in today to have a beard actually. So maybe today I'm allowed to use a blade. So this is where one has to be very careful when studying the reason for the commandments, to know and to be able to make that distinction, that the reason has nothing to do with the commandment. The commandment is true, and it's a truism forever, regardless of the commandment. Okay, so we saw over here so far 2 reasons why I cannot use cut stones on the Mizbeach. Number 1, Ibn Ezra, because the remainder of the cut stone you're going to maybe throw out, or like the Rambam says, the remainder of the cut stone you're going to use to make a carved image, you're going to make an idol. However, my friends, he quotes now Aval HaRamban, he quotes now Nachmanides. V'natan ta'am bazeh ve'hu anachon, and he endorses this third latter opinion of the Ramban, Nachmanides, and he says, and this is the right reason, if you ask him. Okay, Rabbeinu Bahye likes this one, we're about to say, okay? And he says it's more correct than Mikol Mashin Emarbo. This is more correct than the other 2 reasons that we read. Okay, so let's see what the Ramban wants to say. Why can't I use cut stones? Lefi she'acherev koho shel Esav. He says, you're actually focusing on the wrong point. You guys are focusing on the fact that there's going to be leftover stone. Nothing to do. He says the point is, what are you using to cut? The problem is that you're using iron. You're using barzel. You're using metal. And that's koho shel Esav. That is the instrument of war. That's the instrument of Esav. Esav's power comes from the sword. Like Yaakov blesses, like Yitzchak blesses him. Ve'al harbecha tihyeh. You will live by the sword, right? And die by the sword. Esav lives by the sword. We have to realize, my friends, that as Jews, our weapon is not the sword. Yes, we pick up a sword when we have to defend ourselves, but our main weapon is how we talk. Kol Yaakov. Our prayer is our weapon. Our mouths is our sword. Ele barechev ve'ele basusim. These come with chariots. These come with horses. Va'anachnu, and the Jew comes. Hashem Elokeinu naskir. We come with the name of God. The way we fight, my friends, is always through our words, through our prayer. That's the real weapon. Of course, again, we must have an army. We must pick up weapons. We've seen that in the desert even. Vahamushim. We left Egypt weaponized on a simple level. But we have to remember that that's not our primary trade. That's not our primary weapon. We have it, but that's really Esav's weapon. Esav is the sword, right? Esav is the one who holds the sword, who carries the sword. Ve'ine Esav sanui, and Esav is hated by God, like it says in Malachi. Ve'et Esav saneti, ve'inehu meruhak min hamizbeach. Esav is despised, yes, and he is the antithesis of the altar. Ve'en hagazit ikara isur. Says Rabbeinu Bahye, you guys are getting stuck on the wrong thing. You guys are making the whole Dvar Torah about why you can't cut it because of the leftover pieces. But you're forgetting the problem is not the cutting part. The issue is how you cut it, the instrument that's used. The primary problem here is not that you cut it, but how you cut it. Now it says, I'll prove it to you. The Pasuk says in Devarim, Lo tanif alehem barzel. Don't put metal on the stone. Let's say somebody wanted to cut the stone with a different instrument, not iron. Ilu asa'an gazit bikli kesef. Let's say you used silver, or beshamir, or that special worm. Remember the worm that we used to engrave the letters on the hoshen, on the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol? A special worm that was able to cut through stone. Let's say theoretically you wanted to cut the stone with a worm. Would that be allowed? Would one be allowed to cut the stones with a worm? Answer is, mutar medina Torah. Yes, it's allowed. So I just proved to you the problem is not that you're cutting it, because you're allowed to cut it with certain instruments. Problem is you can't cut it with an iron. Beautiful. The problem here is that you shouldn't use barzel, iron. Now the pasuk doesn't say barzel. It says herev. It says sword. Why? Because it's alluding to why is iron an issue? Because iron ends life. It destroys the world. And therefore, keep it very far from the Mizbeach, which is there to bring peace. Mizbeach, what does Mizbeach do? Creates peace between us and Hashem. When we bring a korban on the Mizbeach, it allows us to be in peace with God. He forgives us, we attain forgiveness, and we become better. That's why, by the way, there's not a single iron instrument used in all of the entire service of the Beit HaMikdash. Not only cutting the stone. Nowhere we find iron. Even in the Beit HaMikdash, Pasuk says, "Umikbot vegarzen kol kli barzel lo nishma babayit behibanoto." Shlomo HaMelech as well made sure not to allow any barzel in building the Beit HaMikdash. Beautiful idea. So here we have a huge mahloket. What's the problem? Is the problem cutting it? Or is the problem how you cut it? According to the Ibn Ezra, according to the Rambam, the issue is cutting it. Doesn't matter how. Cutting any cutting is a problem because you're going to have leftover stone. According to the Ibn Ezra, it's going to be thrown out. According to the Rambam, it's going to be used for Avodah Zarah. According to Rabbeinu Bahye over here, quoting the Ramban, however, the issue is not cutting it. The issue is how you cut it. If you were to cut it theoretically with something else, that would be fine. The problem over here is the iron, because iron, again, is something that's Esav's trade. It's a sword. We don't use swords in Judaism. That's not something that we ideally want. And he ends over here with a beautiful midrash. Uba midrash, ki harbecha henafta aleha. The words, for you will have raised your sword over it. Mikan amru, from here our rabbis say, hamizbeyah nikra nibra la'arichut yamav shel adam. The altar is made to increase a person's life, to prolong someone's life by attaining forgiveness, like we just said. So the mizbeyah is a form of atonement, to extend life. Vehabarzel, the sword, is to cut life, lekatzer yamav, to shorten. Eno badin, therefore it's not appropriate, it's not appropriate to employ the instrument that shortens life over something that prolongs man's life. Rashi over here gives a little bit more color on this last idea. Look what he says. Ve'od, she'hamizbeach metil shalom ben Yisrael avihem shebashamayim. The Mizbeach, my friends, brings shalom. Ve'harei dvarim lefichach, sorry, I skipped a line, very important line. Lefichach lo yavo alav koret umhabel, and therefore, my friends, please pay attention to this. Therefore, because the Mizbeach brings shalom, because the Mizbeach extends life, because it makes peace between Israel and their Father in heaven, there should not come upon it anything that cuts and destroys. Look at this. A Mizbeach is protected because it brings shalom. Ve'harei dvarim kal v'homer. My friends, please stop whatever you're doing and listen to the following line. Whatever you're doing needs to be stopped and listen to the following line. Ve'harei dvarim kal v'homer. And here we have a following conclusion. Uma avanim, if stones she'enan ro'ot ve'lo shom'ot ve'lo medaberot, if stones which are inanimate objects, they don't breathe, they're not even like trees, they don't grow, they don't change, they don't listen, they don't talk, they don't see, nothing. If stones which are inanimate objects, al yedei shemetilot shalom, but because they bring peace, again, not by choice, they don't have free will, but at the end of the day, they bring peace. And therefore, Amra Torah ve'lo tanif alehem barzel, the Torah writes, it's protected from having any sword, any metal put on it, because you bring peace. Hametil shalom ben ish leishto. Imagine somebody's going to bring now shalom between a man and his wife. Ben adam lachavero, between a person and their friend. Alahat kama vekama shelo tevoehu puranut. How much more so, my friends, if a human being is able to bring peace between two people, that they will merit, that punishment will not come their way. Wow. My friends, here you have this secret right here. I just showed you Rashi. I just gave you a gem. I just gave you a diamond that you should pay $1 million for. I just gave you a secret. Rashi tells the secret to avoid punishment, the secret to avoid calamity, is someone who creates shalom. You bring shalom between people. You bring shalom between a husband and a wife. You bring shalom between two friends. This, of course, was the trait of Aharon HaKohen. Aharon HaKohen was Ohev Shalom Verodev Shalom. A lot of times in life, we see people fighting. We like to stir the coals. We like to create mahloket. We like fights, right? It's exciting. Someone's annoyed, and instead of trying to make shalom, we add fuel. Yeah, by the way, I agree with you. You don't know the half of it. They're also like this, and they do that, and you know what they said about you. That's not going to bring us any bracha. Over here, Rashi is telling us that we zochet bracha in life. If you want to merit blessing, bring shalom between people. Become a peacemaker. Become someone who is trying to diffuse. Someone who is trying to bring people together, not separate, not destroy. Gossip destroys. Slandering destroys. Egging people on destroys. Our job is to, like the Mizbeach, bring shalom. If you know two people that are fighting, your job is not to take sides. That's not what Aharon did. Your job is to create peace. Your job is to take yourself out. Don't make it about you either, by the way. A lot of times, we're so self-centered, we're so egotistical, we're so arrogant, that even two other people fighting somehow has to connect to us. You ever met people like that? Two other people fighting somehow has to become about us. We have to somehow find a way that this fight, oh yeah, it's also because you know what they did to me last time, right? What are you making it about you for? Take ourselves out, make it about the shalom. Bringing peace between these two people. There can be, my friends, nothing greater in the world than when we bring shalom. We have over here a promise. We have over here a guarantee from the Mizbeach. If the Mizbeach, which is an inanimate object, gets shalom, if he is protected from getting cut down, someone who brings shalom between a husband and a wife, someone who creates shalom between two friends, they as well will merit that no punishment will come upon them. This is, my friends, a very, very, very important Rashi and lesson that we learned from the Mizbeach. The final pasuk, Velo ta'ale b'ma'alot al mizbehi. Look at this pasuk, my friends. When you're climbing the altar, there were no steps. You know why no steps? Pasuk says, Asher lo tegale ervatecha alav. Because if there were steps, then you would see the person's nakedness. Look what Rashi says. Al yedei ma'alot. If there's a stair, ata tzarich le'archiv psiotecha. You have to widen your step. You have to make a large step to get to the next step. Right? You have to move a foot, 6 inches, 8 inches, however high the next stair is. Now, now you're not actually showing your nakedness because they were wearing shorts, the Kohanim were. But nonetheless, it is a little bit less sanua. It's not so modest to take big steps. You are seeing more of the person's legs. It's a little bit bizayon. And again, Umad varim kal vahomer. Rashi ends off with another kal vahomer, another conclusion. If stones don't have feelings, a person has to be careful not to offend them, not to show them too much of his skin, not to show too much of his nakedness. Amra Torah ho'il v'yesh b'hem tzorech. Nonetheless, you shouldn't belittle them. Chavercha shehu b'dmut yotzerecha. If your friend is created in the image of your Creator, and you may say, well, he's not my friend, Rabbi, I hate him. He's still created in the image of the Creator. Doesn't matter if you like him or not, believe it or not, he's in the image of God. Umakpid al bizyuno, and he is going to be offended. Alachat kama vekama, how much more so we cannot offend that person. My friends, I think there's a very immediate conclusion we come to when the Torah concludes this paragraph of the Ten Commandments with this mitzvah. I think Rashi is very clear in what he's trying to say. The message that he's trying to convey, Rashi is very clear. Rashi over here teaches us at the end 2 lessons about how we should treat other people. Number 1, bring shalom, and number 2, don't embarrass people. My friends, very, very easy sometimes, after you get the 10 Commandments, after we get inspired, a person could go to a shi'ur, a person could decide they want to do something for refuah shlema. Can I give you an example? I'll give you an example. Sometimes I'll give you a very sad example how sometimes in life we're so focused on getting closer to Hashem, but it comes at the expense and the price of hurting people. We're so focused on growing with God that we end up hurting man. You ever met people like this sometimes? Very sad when this is the price that people think they need to pay, is that I'm going to get closer to God at your expense. I'll give you an example. Let's say there's a Tehillim chat. Sometimes there's a Tehillim chat for somebody. And now, everyone wants to say Tehillim. And in the person's excitement to say Tehillim for the Refu'ah Shalema, just imagine one person on the chat were to start getting angry at people and embarrassing people and calling out people, and how come you're not saying, how come you're not doing, and what's going on, I'm doing, I'm trying, we need a refuah. And then in the way of saying chapters and books and finishing books of Tehillim, they're going to embarrass one person. It's something that's easy to see how such a thing could happen, because you're so focused on finishing the books. Let's go, we got to finish. But then in the meantime, you're stepping and you're hurting people's feelings. You're only going to read one chapter. I read 10. This is not going to bring a refu'ah shlema to the person. This is not the message that we're supposed to take. The message that we're supposed to take is that we're getting closer to God, the 10 Commandments. But make sure you bring shalom. Make sure you don't embarrass people. Don't step on people. Don't take big steps. Don't show the Mizbeach your nakedness, and don't show people your nakedness. Remember, people have dignity. People need to protect and preserve their honor. And I think there's one final lesson over here, my friends. From the fact that the parasha ends off with, again, this idea over here of seemingly something that's simple, not supposed to take large steps as you're climbing. You know, there's a joke of these three partners. They were at a convention together, and they rented out a large suite on the top floor of a 75-story hotel. They had a long day of meetings. They get to their hotel, they just want to go to sleep, and they were shocked to realize that their elevator in the hotel is broken. Of course, they were furious. They demanded a refund, but now they have to get to their room, so what are they going to do? So they have to climb 75 stories. So they decided, these three friends, that they're going to try to kill the time to break the monotony of this unpleasant trek up the 75 flights. So they had a plan. The first guy is going to share for the first 25 flights jokes. Pass the time. The next guy for the next 25 flights is going to share songs. And the third guy for the next 25 flights is going to share stories. Okay? So you start climbing the stairs. And the first guy, 25 flights, he's telling jokes and they're cracking up. And before they know it, they're on the 26th floor. And then the next guy goes and he starts telling for the next 25 flights. He starts telling all of his songs, singing beautiful songs. Yeah, they must really be fit. That's for sure. And then finally, the third guy, as they get to the 51st floor, he says, let me begin with my saddest story first. I left the room key in the car. I left the key in the room, in the car. Ay, ay, ay. So my friends, I think there's another important lesson. What it means that as we're growing on the Mizbeach, as we're climbing the Mizbeach, not to put stairs. There should be a ramp. And that is that sometimes after getting the 10 Commandments, a person could be so inspired. A person could decide, you know what? I'm going to get closer to Hashem now. I'm going to grow. I'm going to do amazing things. But sometimes we're so excited to grow that we grow in a pace that we're not ready for. We take very large steps. We take a step on the Mizbeach that maybe is too big of a leap. One that's not really us. We saw someone else do it, and we said, you know what? I want to be like that. In life, we should never copy other people. We should get inspired. But we have to always make sure that we're staying true to who we are. We have to always make sure that we're growing at a pace that we're ready for. Whenever we're making changes, we have to make sure that it's something that we're able to handle. A lot of times a person takes a big step that they're not able. You see it a lot of times. A person goes, maybe they grow in yeshiva, and they take huge steps. And they become from 0 to 100 overnight clubbing to Shomer Shabbat. And what happens a lot of times, they're Shomer Shabbat and they're very, very strong, But how did you do that? You didn't get there. You jumped. When a person jumps and they're not ready, the Torah writes, don't take a big step, because you know what will happen? Your nakedness will be uncovered. Don't become who you are not. If you jump to places that are beyond yourself, then maybe you're going to actually, what ends up happening is you're going to fall and you're going to reveal your nakedness. You're going to become actually ashamed. A lot of those people that I just told you about, they end up coming back and they actually fall very, 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 very deep, unfortunately. They become less than who they were when they went. They reveal their nakedness. They become ashamed because they fall down, because they overestimate what they are able to accomplish. The person has to realize and stay true to who they are. Work on each level. There's a level, of course, by the way, growth has to be a leap of faith. I have to go to an uncomfortable place in order for me to grow. It can't be known territory. If I'm used to lifting 50 pounds, there's going to be that 5-pound gap that I need to lift, 5 extra pounds that I'm not used to. If you're skiing and you're on green, you need to go at a certain point to blue. Blue is a little bit beyond, it's unknown. So you need to have that leap of faith of going to the blue. But don't go from the green to the black. Double black, diamond, right? You need to go to the blue. It has to be something that you're able to push yourself a little bit, but that you know you will be able to secure. You understand? This is the lesson from the Mizbeach. When we take large steps, we can end up falling in life. Steps have to be calculated, thought out. They have to be real, something that we're ready for. As an example, last week we saw the splitting of the sea. Our rabbis tell us that the maidservant saw visions on Yam Suf greater than the greatest prophet. Of course, the question is asked, if she saw such levels of prophecy, why are you calling her a maidservant? She's not a maidservant. She's a Naviyah. She's a prophetess now. The answer is because the second they finished, she went back to being a maidservant. Says Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, you could see the greatest visions. But if I'm handing it to you a freebie, if you go from 0 to 100, if you go from maid to prophet, you're not going to stay a prophet, I guarantee you. You're going to end up falling very quickly, you're going to go back to being your old self. The achievements, the levels that we attain, and you see it, look at the people that you know are growing, it's only because they're growing step by step. Going to a level that's uncomfortable, but one level above where they are. And then growing, getting there, getting comfortable there. Then go to the next level. Then go to the next level, and go to the next level. That's the only real way to grow in life. Shlomo HaMelech says, beautiful pasuk, in Proverbs chapter 25, pasuk 6, do not stand in the place of the great. Don't stand in the place of the great. Not because by stepping in someone else's shoes you're going to rob their place. But you'll be denying yourself your individual process, the level that is right for you. Again, don't try to be someone else. Get inspired by someone else. But be you. Do what you can do. The worst thing as a rabbi, a lesson that I learned many, many, many years ago, when I started off in my speaking career, I would observe other speakers, other rabbis, and I would try to be like them. And I would try to say jokes that they say, and I would try to talk in the manner that they talk, and I would try to be like them. And I realized that it was a failure. At the end of the day, you can't be other people. You have to be yourself. And by the way, yourself is an amazing person. You'd be surprised. I know we don't think that. I know we don't think we're worthy of greatness. I know we think there's nothing worthy about ourselves to like, but it's not true. There's something beautiful about you. And actually, when I stopped imitating other speakers and I just tried to speak like I would speak, with my own ideas, of course, learning lessons from other people, you could get inspired by other people. You could always even take pointers from other people, but ultimately to be true to who I am. To thine own self be true. I gotta be true to who I am. And eventually what will happen is I will find that I'm climbing beautifully to the top of the ramp. Gemara says that Mor Ukva says the following interesting statement, and we'll end with this, my friends. Mor Ukva says, I, compared to my father, am like vinegar compared to wine. We know vinegar comes from wine. I don't know if you knew that. Vinegar comes from wine. By the way, I'll tell you a secret. A lot of people go to a vegan restaurant thinking there's nothing wrong. What could be wrong? It's vegan. There's no animals. There's nothing from an animal allowed in here, which is true. But besides for certain problems, I'll tell you one very big problem of a vegan restaurant is the vinegar. Okay, V sometimes doesn't stand for vegan, but V for vinegar. Okay, that was my bad joke. I'm sorry. Okay, so the vinegar could be from wine. That's not kosher. So it's vegan, but it has vinegar. So you have to be careful. That's one thing as an example to be very careful of. In general, again, even if your level is that right now, that's where you are, you're eating at a vegan restaurant and you're growing, Be'ezat Hashem, but still be careful, please, from the vinegar. Anyways, he said, me, like my father, compared to my father, I'm like vinegar compared to wine. And he explained why. When my father would eat meat, how long do you guys wait after having meat? Okay, how long do you wait? Some people, 6 hours. Some people, Hungarian or whatever, they do 3 hours. Some people, all of a sudden, they do 1 hour rule, the half hour rule, right? Depending on how hungry you are, right? That's the real answer. How long do you wait after meat? So the truth is, for us, we have to wait 6 hours, right? But look what the Gemara says. Morugva says, my father would wait 24 hours. And me, I don't wait 24. I wait till the next meal around 6 hours later. That's what he said. Now the obvious question is, well, like we say in the Gemara language, mimma nafshach. Either way, if you feel like your father's practice is correct, so you should wait 24 hours. And if you feel like it's not correct, so then why are you comparing yourself to vinegar? Then you're wine. Then you're good. The answer is that Morugva, based on what we're saying today, he realized that his father was on a completely different level, spiritually, than he was. For his father, waiting 24 hours was something that was good for his father. It's something that enriched his father's life. It's something that his father did and he got closer to Hashem. But for him, he knew for himself, if he were to wait 24 hours, he wasn't on that level yet, that it would mean anything to him. It would just be a waste of experience. The halakha is 6 hours, so he waited what the halakha suggests. Again, I think the point is beautiful. That in life, sometimes we see people doing things that are extras. We have to ask, make sure before we copy them, is this something that I am ready for? You know, Mesilat Yesharim, he has Rav Moshe Chaim Lotato. He builds his book on levels. His book is designed, is categorized by levels. You have to first achieve level 1. First, you got to conquer Zehirut, building blocks. Then you got to conquer Zerizut. Then you got to conquer Nekiyut, Perishut, Hasidut. Right? He goes and he builds. And it's very, 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 very important what he's saying. The goal of the book is to become a Hasid. But you can't become a Hasid without going through all of these necessary steps. You're going to try to jump and skip a step. Sometimes, you take stairs, you skip a step, okay. But you can't skip a step in life. In growth, in spirituality, you can't skip. You can't jump. You got to take step at a time. You got to make sure that you're ready. Person's growing. If you're not ready, sometimes rabbis don't know this lesson, by the way. Sometimes rabbis, they don't know this. So they could push a student to be something that he's not ready to be. And it could backfire tremendously. So one has to be very, very careful to make sure that we're climbing the Mizbeach, the ramp, up to Hashem in a way that is true to who we really are. So I think we learned over here a beautiful, beautiful lesson or lessons from the ending of the Perashah. Again, a beautiful Perashah of the 10 Commandments. And then it ends with irrelevant laws. Laws about stones and avanim and you can't cut them and how to climb. But we learned today the importance of bringing shalom, the importance of not embarrassing people, the importance of making sure that when we climb, we're climbing at a pace that is appropriate for our level. Okay, we'll stop over here, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Hashem should bless us and all of us with all of these beautiful, beautiful lessons to be able to apply them. God willing, we'll see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.